welcome to Wrestling and Everything Coast to Coast with your hosts, Buddy Sotello Esquire and Evan Ginzburg. And Evan, would you like to introduce our very unique guest for this evening?
Absolutely. He is the author of Lance by Chance, Wrestling as a Von Erich. About Lance Von Erich, he is Vinny Berry, and Vinny, amazingly, is almost a double for Lance, physically, facially, and it's a shame we can't see him today because he is dashing, but what can you do? We're going to do a audio interview with Vinny tonight because of he's right by the border of Mexico, like every third country song. So the internet issues have prevented us from having him on screen, but regardless, he is Vinny Berry. How are you tonight, Vinny?
I am doing well. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, our pleasure. Our pleasure. And Buddy has a million Lance questions and WCCW questions, but let me start with this. I heard you on another broadcast, and I just find it fascinating that the fans of the Von Erichs have some kind of, grudge against Lance. And yours truly, I'm a WWF fan, and I've spent my entire life living in the New York area, and I enjoyed the Von Erichs like everything else. But when I saw Lance, I was like, the guy's a good wrestler. He's giving 110%. He looks great. He rose to the occasion. He didn't have a ton of experience at the time, and he still came out each and every night and put on good matches. And, it's like I grew up on the Valiant Brothers. They weren't brothers. Before that, the Graham Brothers. They weren't brothers. I mean, I don't understand the hostility. And in fact, I saw one guy when you were promoting the book on one of your pages, the guy writes fraud ! And I'm going, this guy's an obsessive. I don't understand why somebody doesn't grasp. It's like an actor playing a role. What's the big issue, Vinny?
You know what? That is the $1 million question. It's like it is the weirdest thing. With the Von Erich Nation, as they call them, the Von Erich fans, they are loyal to a fault, and God love them. I've lived in Texas most of my life, and I'll tell you, the people down here are incredible, but I've never seen anything like the loyalty to the Von Erichs. There's a lot of people that already told me I'm not going to read the book if it's not approved by Kevin. Well, for your information, Kevin wrote a passage in the book, basically a forward. So he contributed. But yeah, it is. You know what? He doesn't understand it either. And he talks about in the book is that after Fritz went on TV, things changed from night and day, the way that the people treated him. And he wasn't treated kindly at all, and yeah, it's wrestling, people. It's not like it's the first time anybody did this when Fritz did it.
But if anything, it's the promoter's decision. It's the booker's decision, or whoever the case may be. And he was just playing a role, which he did particularly well. And I'm going to throw this one out, and then I'll give it over to Buddy. I even said, he's welcome on the show, and you're like, he's not doing publicity for the book because of all this nonsense. And, I think people should embrace the guy, I mean, look, like I said, I live 3,000 miles away in New York, and I don't have the same emotional attachment to the Von Erichs as a Texan would, but I watched Lance Von Erich on TV, and I enjoyed him. I have no issue with the guy.
Yeah, you know what? I agree with you, Evan. I go back and I look at it work, and I'm like, what's the problem? And he talks about in the book about him being an extremist. Whatever he did, that he went, just all out to to do whatever it was, whether it was wrestling or starting a business or lifting weights or, anything, riding his bike when he was a kid, whether it was good for him or bad, he did it full throttle, everything. So, I know that's where his passion was in wrestling too. He wanted to be good at it, but, he felt like he had a lot of pressure on him. He admits that he wasn't quite ready to wrestle with the Von Erichs when it was time to wrestle for the Von Erichs. And there was a lot of pressure on him, performing at that level because Lance also too, he says he worked with a lot of great wrestlers in the business, but he credits the second generational wrestler, guys like the Von Erichs and the Funks and Kelly Kaninsky and Matt Bourne and, Steve Simpson, guys that have been around it since they were little kids, Yeah. And so that's what he was up. He was, Fritz was wrestling with those kids all their lives and messing with them and teaching them things so they could do that thing and they could wrestle in their sleep. I'm sure.
Okay, buddy.
So what I've always thought of as Lance Von Erich, because I did watch him, as he first came into World Class. I think Lance is sort of like the new Coke. You could sort of call him the new Coke of wrestling. But he was stuck with a name that he shouldn't have been stuck with. If he was something else, if they had made new Coke and they hadn't replaced, Coke itself with a new formula, but instead, called it, super soda or something like that, it probably would have been a popular soda. But the problem is trying to take on that Von Erich name and trying to bring him in when people knew he wasn't a Von Erich back in the day when kayfabe was such, still ruled the roost and people were still, possessed by, the appearance of things being legitimate when, deep down we knew they weren't. Lance was sort of a victim of that era and people, wanting to say he's not a real Von Erich, he's fake, and I think that was, one of the things that sort of stood in his way. If he had been able to really exist on his own and be his own wrestler with his own ID, I think he would have been a lot more successful. What do you guys think?
You know what? I think you're right. If he maybe stuck as Ricky Vaughn, I don't know if he would have, because when he came to World Class, they put a rocket on that kid. I mean, he was wrestling with the Von Erichs and he was, main event status right away. But if there was people, there's a lot of people today, you Evan brought up a very good thing about, about 9 months ago, I started, testing the temperature in the room with this book, putting Lance Von Erich pictures on Von Erich group pages, hey, Lance was my favorite Von Erich, or this is my favorite Von Erich and stuff like that. And, just to test the temperature. And boy, a lot of people came out, like you said, made comments like they did. Everybody says today that, oh, I knew he wasn't a Von Erich all along. Well, you didn't act like it when he was there. You watch those old videos on WWE Network, and let me tell you something. They're mobbing that kid just like they're mobbing Mike and Kerry. They're all over him. They are just loving that kid. And, David Manning, who had a strong pulse, and I talked to him quite a bit for this book, said that people bought in to Lance Von Erich as a Von Erich. So a lot of people, maybe they feel duped, like, oh, I can't believe I fell for that. I knew he was fake all along. Man, people are just finicky, or I don't know what it is. It's odd to me.
Vinny, the irony is, I grew up in New York, and I used to see Waldo Von Erich, and he he would pose with Nazi regalia, and he was like the nicest guy on the planet. He just played a role particularly well. And I found out after the fact, I had no idea he was the opponent who wrestled Bruno the most. I thought it was Kowalski, but Waldo Von Erich, time and time again, drew money playing a Nazi, with the emphasis on the word playing, because he was not. So they're all playing roles. And,
right.
you know, I feel bad for Lance, because, like I said, he was a young guy. He looked like $1 million. He gave 110%. He put on good matches. I mean, it wasn't like, you know, ironically, Mike Von Erich was no wrestler, you know. I mean, I hate to speak ill of the dead, but when all is said and done, Lance did a good job. And, you know, 30 years later, 35 years later, whatever the case may be, to not even be able to, do a publicity campaign for his own book, because, for whatever reason, I don't want to put words in his mouth, it just seems unfortunate. I feel like the guy got a bad rap.
Well, I think you actually really hit on something that is why people act so differently with the Von Erichs than they do with other wrestlers, like you talk about the Valiants or something like that, or the Grahams, not actually being brothers, is the fact that there was that star-crossed element of the Von Erichs, where they had so many of them die in such tragic circumstances, that the idea that Lance was sort of brought in as a fake family member, I think people sort of felt that was distasteful in some ways. Like you can't add to the Von Erich family artificially. That the Von Erichs were just something that needed to be like in itself, on its own pedestal, and that you couldn't just add some fake guy in there and have it be okay with the fans. They weren't going to accept that substitute.
That makes perfect sense, but what is the line between loyal and obsessive? It's 30, 35 years later.
The Von Erichs, obsessive is all that there is. Would you agree with me, Vincent, that there are no mediocre fans of the Von Erichs? There are people who can't stand them, and then there are people that treat them like a religion.
You know what? I never saw anything like it before in my life. And I lived like 10 miles away from those guys. And, man, 3,500 people went to David Von Erich's funeral.
Wow.
And that's amazing. And I don't know what the number was on Mike's, but, when those tragedies happened, it was like it was your relative. The Von Erichs were a household name to the non-wrestling fan, and everybody up there felt it, I mean, you didn't have to be a wrestling fan, and you felt it in the community, in the city, when David died and Mike died and Kerry died and oh my gosh, and Chris. I remember all of those deaths because everybody wore it, on their sleeve and on their heart and on their face, and, everywhere you went, people were talking about it. Going back to what you were saying, Evan, about the Von Erich, and you brought up Waldo. I've never heard anybody say that Waldo's not a real Von Erich in the way that they do it to Lance, Yeah. I mean, it's like, they're accepting of him, but they're not accepting of Lance. And then, you were talking about the tour. I've asked him, and he's like, yeah, I'll do them. And his schedule is the way that it is. But honestly, he is so far removed from the wrestling business. He didn't even, if this guy did not fall in my lap, there would be no book.
And we had Billy Graham teaming up with Luke Graham. All of a sudden, these guys are relatives. Jerry Graham with Billy Graham. You ever see two guys look less alike?
And yet,
Right.
and the irony also is that the WWE never mentioned that Lanny Poffo and Randy Savage were brothers.
Yeah, and they were on the same shows together. Exactly. Yeah.
You
So,
know,
Yeah.
so basically, you have selective indignation, and not to be repetitive, which is not what you want to do on a radio show, but I feel that Lance got a raw deal. I like the guy, and I'm a purist. I'm an old school, jaded purist, and I just always felt bad, like this kid got a raw deal, and it still seems like it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and you know what? And that's why I wanted to tell the story, because I think it's one of the best untold stories in wrestling, yeah, he did. He seemed to get a raw deal, about, just like you said. But this book is just not about it, Lance Von Erich. A lot of people, are gonna say, well, I've got a you would, Evan, I know you would believe some of the things I've heard. I mean, you've been in the media business for a long time, so you can I'm sure you understand and get it. But a lot of people, have been pretty blunt about how they feel about this book. And yeah, it's a book about Lance. It's his perspective, but man, it covers David Von Erich's death. It covers why they brought in Lance. If the Freebirds, if they didn't have that Freebird and Von Erich feud, which was their bread and butter for about, I can't tell you how many years. It was on and off for a long time. It started in 82, and I think it fizzled out in 89 or something like that. But after 87, I kind of lost passion, I think a lot of people did, because of the tragedies that happened. I think, people, like we say in the book, people were left brokenhearted.
Oh, yeah.
And, so you had that Freebird and Von Erich feud. You had David Von Erich died. They needed somebody to come in because Mike wasn't quite ready. But, they took this guy that looked really good physically, could pass as a Von Erich, and the downside was that he couldn't wrestle, and this guy would have never wrestled in a million years. Was nothing he ever wanted to do, ever.
Well, I'm sure he saw the ups and downs of the wrestling business, because he was in a unique situation. And tell us some of the highlights of the book.
The highlights, he comes in, in the beginning of the chapter, he talks about how he got started into lifting weights. He grew up as a very chubby kid, overweight, and a very domineering mother who was, the way he describes it, almost starving him to lose weight, where she would put him on the Atkins diet, and he was just, very active kid. We talk about him being an extremist. It mentions in the book that, he would ride his bike so far from the house that he would have to call his mom up because he couldn't ride his bike back. And that theme of being an extremist is throughout the book, And then it talks about how David Manning discovered him, and him going into meeting Fritz and learning how to wrestle. But he touches on, he was there during, when Gino Hernandez overdosed. He was there when Mike Von Erich committed suicide. He was there when Kerry had his motorcycle accident, and he was, there. There's a lot of times that he was the only Von Erich. He had Kerry with that motorcycle accident. You had Mike with his toxic shock syndrome. It took him a while to recover from that. And then, Kevin Kevin had a shoulder injury. That was in '86, but I don't know for how long that was. But there was a period where he was the only Von Erich, and a lot of people may not remember that or want to remember that, but he was basically carrying the promotion. And what you got and Evan, what you got to understand is that those turnstiles stopped turning when there was no Von Erichs,
Yeah.
Fritz needed those boys.
So fill us in, because I have no idea post Von Erichs what happened to Lance. Did he work other promotions, or did he just quit? I mean, what happened after the fact?
So he did a little bit of wrestling in the United States right after World Class. He did a tour in Puerto Rico, and he did a little bit of wrestling with Ken Mantell.
Okay.
And at the Wild West of wrestling in Fort Worth, it appears, if you go to like Cage Match, it looks like he was there for several months, and it could have been television tapings, and who knows, because Lance said I don't remember being it that long, and he said by that time I was out of the country. So he did some traveling, and after World Class, he kind of needed to decompress.
Right.
And so he did some traveling, and he ended up staying in Africa, in South Africa. He stayed and did some traveling there, and ended up wrestling over there with Steve Simpson's brother and father for a little while. And then when they moved to the United States, he started wrestling with All Stars Wrestling over there in South Africa, which was run by Paul Lloyd Sr., the father of PJ Black.
Okay.
And so he worked with him. But see, wrestling over there for him was, he just says, wow, it was really my best time in wrestling. For one, he didn't have the pressure of, being under the Von Erich model, or, having to reach up. I don't know. He felt like the pressure was off him, but he wasn't wrestling every night. He wasn't wrestling twice a night,
Right.
And that was the thing that really got him was, he would, he'd start his day in the Metroplex in Dallas, drive 110 miles to Waco for the first match, which was, say, I don't know, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, like the little matches during the week they'd have like four matches at the high school gym. He'd do the opener at that, get back in his car, in his trunks, drive all the way back up to the Metroplex, do a suburb, and get out of his car, run to the ring, to the main event. And he said that happened many, many times.
Yeah, that'll weigh you out. So what is he doing today?
He runs resorts over throughout actually the world. He travels, and he's between 3 different countries. He loves South Africa. He loves Israel. He spends a lot of time in Israel, and that first tour that World Class took him over there in '86, he just fell in love with the country, and he never stopped going back.
He's had an interesting life. I mean, so what's his take on all of this? His place in history. What is his take on it?
Well, I think if looking back, if he could go back and they say, hey, you want to wrestle in Dallas, he would probably say no.
Wow. Okay. I know Buddy has a ton of questions about World Class.
Yeah, well, one of them And it's especially because you were a fan during that time. Do you think that there could have been an opportunity for Lance to work heel? He never really thought that was something that was never considered. And considering how he was getting heat from some of the fans, maybe he could have used that as a way to, leverage himself into greater popularity.
Well, down there when he was with the boys, when he was working with them, he was popular. I mean, I'm telling you, that dude was the cat's meow. But here's what happened. So at that third Parade of Champions, where 2 weeks before or 2 weeks after Mike died, the third one. So Kerry wins the title at the first one. You had the second one, and then Mike wasn't alive for the third one in 87, April of 87. Well, Lance didn't go to that event because he had hurt his shoulder severely bad in a match by the Nord Barbarian. Nord the Barbarian slammed him on his shoulder, almost drove his shoulder into the mat as opposed to him landing on his back. And so he took some time off to heal, but he basically went AWOL. He just didn't return. And this is what he doesn't understand. He doesn't understand nobody communicated anything, and Lance even says that he, being more mature now and looking back, yeah, I should have handled things differently, but he doesn't understand why Fritz went on television and Kerry went on television and saying that he wasn't a relative. He thought that maybe Fritz was concerned that he was going to take the Von Erich name to the WWE, and that's why Fritz did that. But we don't know. I mean, that's only a guess. That's what Lance thinks. But, he thought there was other ways for him to depart. But, he said that he would have been happy just riding off into the sunset, just disappearing. But he just, to this day, cannot understand why Fritz did that. And, if you're, being a purist or, being someone that loves wrestling and kind of understands and respects the boundaries of it, you would think, well, why would Fritz break kayfabe? If just 2 years prior or 3 years prior, whatever it was, 84, 83, that Eddie Mansfield did that and all the pushback that he got. I don't think it set well with Fritz. I don't know if that was, there's a lot of things that happened with World Class that you could say, this is what led to its downfall and everything. I don't think it was one thing, but I just don't think that was good for him to do that. What do you think, Evan?
Well, here's the big question. When you're talking about Fritz, did he push his kids too hard?
That was my next question.
That
was my next question.
Was that just your traditional promoter, drawing money and pushing the guys, like in our movie 350 Days, these guys worked an insane schedule. Was that every other promoter, or was he pushing his own children beyond human endurance? What's your take on it?
Well, I know that, how hot of a ticket seller those kids were. And those kids were packing them in. And those boys could not go anywhere in public without getting a piece of paper stuck in their face. And so, yes, Fritz needed all those boys on the card everywhere they went, because he was making hand over fist, and those kids, his boys, were the bread and butter of that that promotion. You know, they were fortunate to have like the Freebirds come in, and those, as far as heels, those were the biggest heels in that territory. And you had guys like King Kong Bundy and Kabuki and Bill Irwin and some really good heels. You know, Killer Khan.
One Man Gang was there. Yeah,
Brody. Yeah,
Butch
Brody
Reed
was a face, right?
Yeah, yeah. In World Class, he was. Yeah.
Abdullah was a heel.
Yeah.
Butch Reed and Ron Simmons did some time in World Class. I remember. You know, they had the Missing Link, one of my favorite guys of all time. Yeah, was a big, and Kamala,
Sure.
Yeah, Kamala.
Recently departed Kamala. Yeah, that was something that I was thinking about too. Is that, you know, for a short time, I think World Class had that Icarus syndrome where they were looking at being as big as the WWE or the WWF at the time. And what do you think was the major crossroads that kept them from becoming as big as the WWF?
Well, I've heard a lot of things. I mean, you know, I've heard a lot of things like Black Bart said, and I just heard this on a podcast that he was talking on, that that Fritz they were, I don't know, in a meeting with TBS or something, Turner Television or whatever, and that Fritz kind of pulled the plug and didn't think the boys were ready. And I don't know. I've never heard that from anyone but Black Bart. I don't know if where he heard that, but I'll tell you this. After Gino Hernandez died, you had David Von Erich died, and you had Gino Hernandez die, and then you had Mike Von Erich die. Man, I tell you, I let me throw these numbers out to you. On May 6th, 1984, at Texas Stadium, where you have an open roof, it was about 110 plus degrees, right? You had 43,000 paid customers in there.
Wow.
3 years later, 2 weeks after Mike's death, you didn't even break 6,000 people in attendance, and it was 80 degrees.
Wow.
Those people were hurt. Those people were, brokenhearted. And what David Manning said was we could have maybe recovered from about 2 of those deaths, but not 3. And I think that is exactly what happened. People just, you go to wrestling for escapism. You go to wrestling, to forget about the tragedies or the failures or the disappointments in your life, and then there they are, and those kids, all those kids were young and had promising careers, all of them.
Yeah, tragic.
Yeah. Well, you also, I saw, on your Facebook page, you were talking about Kerry Von Erich, and one of your observations was that Kerry, after the foot injury and losing his foot, worked so hard to hide that foot injury, and that maybe he could have really done something if he had embraced it and shown, hey, look at what I can do, as an amputee and as someone who's missing a foot. Look at how well I can still wrestle, and use that as something to inspire people. There was something about the Von Erichs that was just so, I guess the fans loved the Von Erich so much, but there was something hidden about them always. And I think that was one thing that didn't sit right with the majority outside of Texas. That was always my view of the Von Erichs, was that there was something kind of an inside, not a joke, but an inside story or a backstory that was going on that we weren't really privileged to. And you never really trusted them because of that.
That's an interesting observation. I don't know. I know they worked hard on their image, and that was important to them. Kids had, well, not just kids, everybody adored them. And one thing that I wanted to mention that I guess I thought about when you had brought it up, Evan. Kind of going back a little bit where you said about Fritz pushing his kids. Did Fritz push his kids too hard? Well, he kind of had to, if he wanted to keep that promotion up in the money that he was making. I mean, those kids were the ticket.
Well, that goes to every corporate, the bottom line is, the be all and end all, but ultimately, with the exception of Kevin, obviously, they all died. So maybe considering the promotion ultimately went under anyway, maybe, look, I'm just talking from a fan who was part of me says the guy pushed them too hard, and part of me understands the promoter wants to make money, and they push all these guys too hard. So,
but I think there's a different level when it's a parent. I think there's even more pressure. I mean, Vince McMahon presses you on something, you can just say, "Screw you, Vince, I'm leaving." But when it's your father, that's doing this, and the one that brought you up, you can't say no. That sort of sports parent on steroids is a uncomfortable expression, but the fact that you're a sports parent, but you're amping it up, and you do see it, with Vince McMahon, kind of with Stephanie and with Shane to some level, at which he's willing to let his son jump off the top of a 30-foot cage and land in the middle of the audience. There's this thing that, my kids will perform for me, and that they'll do what I say no matter how tough it is, because that's what I want them to do, because I'm their parent. What do you think of that?
Vinny?
Well, I don't know. I was kind of stuck on thought on that. I definitely follow what you're saying. Yeah. I mean, maybe hey, he expects me to do this, or I can't let my dad down. I have to, I don't know. I mean, again, that's all speculation, but yeah, what a tragic story,
But ultimately, though, when I think of the Von Erichs, one, you think of the glory days in baseball stadiums with the Freebirds, but there's always that feeling of sadness. I mean, I've met Kerry Von Erich when he was wrestling on the East Coast here with WWE, and even prior with Indies, and you just go, what a nice guy, good-looking guy, young guy, sociable, and it's like, to sit there and put a gun in your mouth, it just leaves it's a tragic, and it's really Shakespearean. It's Shakespearean. The entire family, with the exception of one guy. And I watched that. What's the name of the show with all the scandals?
Dark Side of the Ring.
Dark Side of the Ring. And when I was watching Kevin, I was just like, okay, he's living in paradise. He's in Hawaii or whatnot, and it's beautiful, and he's, living his life, but you just feel like the guy has ghosts around him. He just had that haunted look, and it bothered me for days after I watched that show.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what? They're very approachable. Kerry was a very nice guy, and very personable, very just a sweetheart, right? Kevin, I reached out to Kevin for this book, and we talked via text, in one day for about 2 hours. And so, and then I reached out to him again recently, and just really nice, and wanted to know how I was doing and was hoping I was doing well. So, he, they're good guys. But yeah, I mean, I've tried to put myself in his shoes many, many times. I have one brother. I have one sister. My sister passed away. That was very, very painful. I don't know if I could go through that 5 times. And he went through it 5 times. He had his brother, his oldest brother, Jack, was electrocuted in 1958 or 59.
Yeah, it feels almost like the Kennedy curse, one after another, and he's the last man standing. And like I said, he just had this like haunted look to him. Maybe I was reading too much into it, but I felt for him. I'm like, how much pain can one person go through? How much pain?
Absolutely. Yeah. No, and trust me, a lot of people, I've heard that. You hear that if you, especially here in Texas, everyone says, "Wow, man, can you believe Kevin?" I mean, you hear it. It's not every day, not now, of course, but especially when those kids died. Oh man, I would hear my parents just, oh my gosh, they lost another son, and everyone said it, and so yeah, I mean, a lot of people feel bad for Kevin, because he did have to endure a lot of tragedy, and then here he is, and it says a lot for him to keep on going because, I mean, hey, he had 3 brothers commit suicide. How tragic is that? And
also, Eddie and Mike Graham and another member of the family. So, there's a lot of tragedy in wrestling, and I could see it affecting the fan base after a while. Like Buddy said, like you guys said, you want to go to a show, have fun, escape your problems, and when it's right in front of you, it's tough. It's tough.
And this was something I was also going to bring up, which is that do you feel, Vincent, that the way that the Von Erichs were kind of also symbolized sort of Texas and what was going on in Texas, and sort of like a microcosm of Texas itself and its fall from glory in a way? That you have the drugs, you have the appearance of looking fantastic, but behind the scenes there's all this ugliness going on. And I think maybe the people of Texas had a hard time dealing with the fact that these were true products of Texas. You can't get anything more Texas than the Von Erich family. That just the Alamo isn't as Texas as the Von Erich family. And so as the Von Erichs went, so went Texas. I mean, I'd say maybe I'm drawing too much there, but I think that their losses and the drugs that were going on in the background and all the unseemly things that were kind of going on, when those came to light, it's sort of shone a light on Texas that Texas wasn't so proud to have seen by the rest of the country.
Well, I'm sure drugs and alcohol abuse and all that stuff, steroids were prevalent in every promotion back then at that time, right? But when you have so many things happen in one promotion where one red flag comes up after another and comes up after another, yeah, I mean, it's hard not to look at the Von Erichs, right? It's hard not to look at the Texas wrestling as, either being cursed or having this aura of, the way you described it, with the looking great on the outside and not so great on the inside, so to speak.
I have a big question. Vinny, they're making a Hulk Hogan movie. I know they've done documentaries on the Von Erichs, but why wouldn't a film about them be made? Because God, what a story. I mean, I would think that's a more interesting story than Hulk Hogan. I mean,
Absolutely. Well, you know what? That's good that you bring it up. Supposedly, and this is what I heard, there was an article that came out right before the pandemic, and I would think like February or March or somewhere in there, and that there was talk of a movie, or they were working on a movie, and then because then when I talked to Johnny Mantel, and Johnny Mantel said that Kevin had a hand in helping with the movie, and I think his concern was, well, if Kevin has a hand in writing the movie, is it going to be as actual facts as it needs to be? Would he soft soap it a little bit? That was what Johnny said to me. He thought maybe with Kevin having his hand in it that we might not get the full story. But I recently heard someone was talking about the movie, and for whatever reason, I don't know if the plug was pulled on that or if it got pushed to the back burner, but there is talk of a movie. And you are absolutely right. That is a movie.
oh yeah, that's a mini series. Yeah,
A Greek tragedy.
Okay, but here's the $1 million question. Would they have someone portray Lance in that movie?
well, it's part of the story. I would think so.
I don't know if they'd have enough time to fit it in. It depends where they would cut it off. Where they would, if they went into like Kerry's whole WWE to WWF time, they probably wouldn't have time to fit Lance in. It would be hard to do both things. But who knows? Great. Evan can tell me more about movie making than I can tell him. So,
but that is why. I mean that is why we're talking about Lance today, is because of these tragedies, and because of Lance. So if you eliminate Lance from a Von Erich movie, my point is he played an integral part. And a lot of people don't give him that credit. And so I think with this book, and let's just go on the record here. Lance, Lance wasn't the one who wanted to write the book. I wanted to write the book. I wanted to tell this story. And every time I saw Lance or saw some criticism of Lance or anything, I just thought, what is going on with that? It is just one of those things. And I having a news background, we kind of get taught how to sniff out stories, right? Or we see something that's a good story, and
yeah, this is quite a story, and I appreciate you sending me the book because I'm definitely going to read it. I just had the craziest thought pop in my head, and Buddy will appreciate this. I don't want Lance to be the Shemp of the Three Stooges. You understand?
Or the Curly Joe.
Shemp was funny. He got a raw deal comparing him to Curly, like Larry Holmes after Muhammad Ali. Larry Holmes was great, but you can't follow Muhammad Ali. I think Lance got a raw deal. I honestly mean that.
But he went overseas and had a good career over there, and had a good acting career. And a lot of people would be surprised to know that he used the Lance Von Erich name until his final day in wrestling. The only time he used Fabulous Lance was when he was here in the United States, because promoters were concerned that Fritz would, give him a hard time or sue him for using Lance Von Erich or whatever. So that's why he used that Fabulous Lance name.
And he can say, hey, I have the last name of Von Erich and I live to tell the tale. The other, everyone else with the last name of Von Erich didn't live to, other than Fritz.
Right. And, when we were talking about how, like, the dark side of wrestling, so to speak, you were talking about the Grahams and there's other wrestlers that were killed. Well, Bruce Brody was killed. Chris Adams later was shot. And, when I was talking to Lance and we were, I remember this was in the very beginning, he'd mention somebody, just mention a name and he'd say, oh yeah, I remember I worked with him and he's dead now. And then after that, I started working with so-and-so and he's dead too. And then that was kind of like the thing was like, and he mentions in the book, of all the guys that he worked with in world class, and he doesn't include all of the other two places he wrestled internationally and in Portland. But there's like, I don't know, he came up with like 30 names or whatever, and like 70%, 70, or I think it's 70%, 75% are all under the age of 55.
They did a study comparing a WWF pay-per-view from the late 80s to Major League Baseball, football, basketball, etc. And they said the mortality rate was much higher for the wrestlers, much higher. You looked at one of these pay-per-views from that era, and tons of guys are gone, tons of them. They have entire matches, tag team matches, where all four guys are gone. So
plus the managers, plus the refs, plus the
announcers.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So it's a brutal business, and I'm glad that Lance is, he's alive and well and thriving and a successful businessman, as you said. And I hope history is kinder to him than it has been, because this happens with presidents sometimes. Not to compare a wrestler with a president, although Trump did work WrestleMania. The presidents, 50 years after, 100 years after, sometimes history is kinder than, when they were under, intense scrutiny. And, I hope that wrestling and its obsessive fan base is kinder to him down the road.
Yeah, I mean, and you know what? I mean, yes, that would be nice. I think if anything, doing this, I mean, I can't speak for him, but I do think that it was a bit of a healing process for him. He got to talk about this stuff. We talked about this stuff for a long time. It took me 3 years to write the book. I mean, from here to now is probably 3.5 years, and or from then to now, and it's very interesting. This book. In this book, talks about the Von Erich tragedy, and it talks about his journey through wrestling, and it talks about the tragedies of wrestling itself. It was like steroids were prevalent. Placidil was prevalent. Alcohol was prevalent. He says that he doesn't think that he wrestled a sober match in Portland. He like you said, like, look, we know what wrestling is, right? And we just love it. We don't care. It is what it is. But these guys take a beating night after night after night. And so, that's where, hey, maybe a couple shots of tequila might take the edge off a little bit. Oh, hey, man, I hurt my back tonight, I mean, you follow me, and before you know it, the solution becomes a problem.
Sure. Well, buddy.
Oh yeah, no, I this has been fantastic. I really love this conversation. But we are actually running out of time, and I want you to have a chance not only to promote your book, but your website, and tell us about any projects that you have coming up, or what your plans are in the future for maybe writing another book or something like that.
Okay, so this book here, Lance by Chance, Wrestling as a Von Erich. You can find that on www.lancebychance.com, and you can order your book. The book has 25 chapters. It has 35 pictures. It has a passage by Kevin Von Erich, Dusty Wolf, and a foreword by David Manning. And again, I think people are going to be really surprised. There's a lot of things that I'm not sharing. I'm sharing some, I guess, public information, but I do want you to read the book, and I think you're going to walk away very surprised. My aunt read the book the other day, and she said that she walked away with a lot of respect for Lance, and so that was I wasn't expecting that response, so that was good. And she's not a wrestling fan. She probably wouldn't have read the book if she wasn't my aunt, but I will take the compliment anyway. And then I have another website called WrestleVille.com, and I write about indie wrestlers, veteran wrestlers, and it's just something I do to because I love wrestling. So, and that was how I discovered Lance. As far as my future projects, I'm going to continue writing, and I will probably write a book. I don't know what the next subject is. People have already thrown a few names at me. It's something I want to do. I just don't know what that next book is at this moment.
Well, I really appreciate you being able to be a guest despite the technical difficulties that we were having. Your audio came in really well, and we're able to put up some pictures of the book. So, I hope our fans will give it a shot and order some copies. Maybe it'd be a great holiday gift for anyone that's thinking of a unique gift for the holidays.
Oh, it's just in time for the holidays. So yeah, and it's an affordable book too. I think again, I'm going to say this, and whether it's it doesn't sound very humble. The book is good, and if the book wasn't good, I'd still be writing it, because that's just how I was writing this thing on the last minute, man. On the and we sent it up to the printer, and they had a snag, and I still took it back, and I was taking some last minute changes, which I didn't make any fans up there. But you know what? I'm proud of this story. I love what I love what I did with it, and like I said, I'd still be writing on it. And Lance is pretty blown away, and I say that because Lance didn't think he had a story for a book, and he didn't think that anyone would have an interest in it, and he couldn't understand why I wanted to write it. And I just kept on telling him, it's a good story. I believe in it. I know it's good. People are going to buy it. And he was like, okay, but I could tell he was reluctant. And now that it's said and done, he read the book, and I got the most warmest. And you got to understand, Lance is pretty cynical. He is he's the type of guy that you think he's joking when he's not, and he's not joking when you think he is, or vice versa. And he gave me the warmest compliment, and he was amazed by what I produced. And I tell him all the time, I said, you know what, Lance, I can't believe that you wrote this book with me, that we did this project, that you have a book. And he says, yeah, me neither, Vinny.
There you go.
Me neither.
And on the subject of books, a couple quick plugs. Grappling by Gaslight. This is wrestling in the 1880s. John Costa and Buddy and myself were just kids back then in the 1880s. So, and another guest who's been on the show. Everybody loves Mickey Doyle, our buddy. So support
Friend
that
of the
as
show,
well.
definitely.
This is my book, Apartment 4B, like in Brooklyn, growing up on the tough streets of East Flatbush, Brooklyn, in the turbulent 60s and 70s. So there's a lot of books out there. Support them all. I'm writing another one, and I think every wrestler that ever stepped foot in the ring needs a book, right, buddy?
There's a lot of stories to tell, and
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll.
Yeah, but thanks to guys like Vinny, those stories are being told. So I really appreciate you coming in as a guest this week. When you have a future project, please let us know. We'd be thrilled to have you back in. I didn't even get to ask you about Skandor Akbar. I had even like some stuff I wanted to ask you about Skandor Akbar. So I'll have to wait till next time, and hopefully you'll do some more stuff on World Class.
Lance by Chance. You missed the birth of your mother and father. Don't miss this book. Buy it. Support it. 3 years in the making.
It's very good. So any last words you'd like to have for our audience, Vinny?
Guys, I had a very, very enjoyable evening speaking with you about this. This was a very good, hey, we love talking about wrestling, right? And I mean,
yeah.
Golly, I mean, this is what I like to do. And you know, when I got done with the process of writing the book, my wife, you know, because you got to promote, you got to do this, and it can get stressful. And my wife was like, look, you love talking about wrestling. Enjoy your time doing what you're doing. Just have fun with this. And that's, I definitely had fun tonight, and having a fun journey with this book. So thank you. Thank you.
I hope it's a big success, and we're looking forward to having you as a guest in the future.
And look for our very special episode on Mark Bison Smith, 1 hour tribute. Buddy Sotello pouring his heart out. That's our next episode. Very special, something totally different. So that should wrap it up, right, buddy?
That's so true. Thank you so much for that promotion, and we'll see everyone next week. Thanks. Good night.